one of the greatest empires in world history was the Mali Empire. The Mali Empire was one of the most prosperous and powerful empires in the antiquity of Africa. Its growth and expansion from the 13th century onwards was legendary and pivotal in the history and culture of Western Africa. The Mali Empire Volume 1 from author J.P. Martin, available on Amazon, is a book which provides the full historical record of the Mali Empire. From their control over the trans-Saharan trade routes and development of great cities such as Timbuktu, to their influential royal class who produced notable African kings such as Mansa Musa, Sundiata Keita, and Mansa Abubakar Keita II, the Mali Empire made a significant impression. This book is perfect for anyone interested in learning more about the history of Western Africa. Order your copy right now on Amazon. The Mali Empire, Volume 1, from author J.P. Martin. Go to Amazon.com and get your copy today.
At the Okoli Law Group, we specialize in producing justice. If you or a loved one in the Atlanta metro area is facing serious criminal charges, then you need serious legal representation.
The Okoli Law Group is here for you. The Okoli Law Group is here for us.
The Okoli Law Group, serious legal representation.
Alexis here, coming to you with an awesome sale of 25% off when you use promo code OHURU25 at alexisfowler.com. I provide services like digital art, logo designs, packaging designs, web designs, social media flyers, and much more. If you're an entrepreneur with a business or a startup company, make sure you take advantage of this opportunity, getting 25% off when you use promo code OHURU25 at alexisfowler.com.
Peace, family. I hope all is well. I hope what's today? Hope your Monday is going well. I know it's been a minute since we've last streamed. We got brother Ebube Okoli coming on, our resident lawyer. He's going to be coming on and joining us here shortly. We're going to be discussing the whole affirmative action situation. We're going to be discussing the whole affirmative action situation. A shout out to Black Beauty, who's in the chat room. Black Beauty, we are headed to Nigeria. We are headed to Nigeria in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Today is July 17th. We leave. We're leaving August 6th, headed to Nigeria for the Osun Festival. I am looking forward to that. I am looking forward to hitting up and attending the Osun Festival. We're going to have a great time. It is our annual pilgrimage to Osogbo. Again, it is our annual pilgrimage to Osogbo. We are looking forward to it. We're going to have a great time. Black Beauty has been to Nigeria with me before, so looking forward to that. Before we get started, got a couple of announcements. Now, speaking of Nigeria, if you want to roll to Nigeria with us, let me make sure this mic is, let me make sure I'm on the right mic. Oh, there we go. We're good to go. If you want to roll to Nigeria with us, please visit Danfo, DANFO.Africa. Again, please visit Danfo, DANFO.Africa to learn more. Again, if you want to roll to Nigeria with us, please visit Danfo, DANFO.Africa to learn more. We will love to have you all. All right, we got a couple more spots left. So please come join us at Danfo.Africa. Visit Danfo.Africa to learn more. Also, we are rolling to Zanzibar. Okay, we are rolling to Zanzibar November 12th to the 21st. November 12th to the 21st, we are rolling to Zanzibar. So again, I would love to have you guys join us in Zanzibar. Again, we'd love to have you guys join us in Zanzibar. If you got any questions, you want to roll, go to Danfo.Africa. Then we're going to do Benin for the Oshun Fest. I mean, not the Oshun Festival, the Voodoo Festival. Again, we're going to do Benin for the Voodoo Festival. Oh, I got to put the dates up there. Oh, here we go. January 3rd through 12th, January 3rd through 12th for the Voodoo Festival in Benin. Our brother Ebube is in the back waiting room. We're going to bring him on right now. Brother Ebube, what's good?
The Dynasty Mayor, what's going on, brother?
Hey, man, the Ebube Okoli, man. You the man. You are the man.
No, you're the man. You created this platform for people to come on and even have these types of discussions. That's key.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How you been? It's been a minute.
You know, I got about 50 clients right now. You know, I got about 50 cases I'm working, and you know, I thank God for that. Actually, let me introduce myself. Let me not be rude. For those who don't know me, my name is Ebube Okoli. I'm a Nigerian-born, American-trained attorney, geopolitical analyst. I also am the president and owner of the Okoli Law Group. I'm also the creative director for a channel here on YouTube called Up Close and Center. If you haven't been to Up Close and Center, check it out. We drop documentaries. Of course, I've been very busy in the real world, so I haven't been able to be on the virtual world as much, but I have about 3 to 4 documentaries that I'm cooking up, and I'm going to release them pretty back to back. You know, I'm going to go on a little run once things kind of calm down for me here. But if you haven't been, go ahead and go to Up Close and Center and subscribe. Also, too, if you haven't paid your admission here, go ahead and hit that like button. Click that share button. You know, this is content that you don't see everywhere, so go ahead and pay your ticket for admission. Click the like button, click the share button, and let's get to it.
A quick question. With your law firm, how do you handle and balance 50 cases?
Well, here's the thing is that you might get a case and you file entry, and then the case might be 3 months away. So you start preparing for it. You gather witnesses. So you wake up every day, and there may be 10 things you do for 10 different cases. Maybe you speak to this witness about this case in 3 months. Maybe you speak to this witness about a case next week. I try to have all my cases and all my arguments prepared months in advance. And then, you know, you just refine them. And then you go to the court and you had a game plan, you had a play, you know, you run the play. It's almost like playing football. You have a strategy, and then you can have 50 games or 10 games, but it's all the same thing. You essentially have a strategy. You look at the other team, see what they're coming with, and then you know that they're on your schedule. When it's time to show up and play them, you show up and play them. It's similar with court. You know, you got, as long as the dates aren't, sometimes dates might be on top of themselves and you have to file a conflict, but typically you might have, you know, it's typically a one-time event, maybe 2 or 3 times you show up to court, but it's you get your big day and hopefully you win. You know, I've been on a good streak. I've won quite a few, and I don't want to continue winning. So yeah, you just take your victories where you can.
Because you're a lawyer who actually cares. That's why.
Definitely. Well, anything you do, you should want to do it well. You should pursue excellence. The thing you want in life, overall, the thing you want to pursue excellence, right? Because everything else is a side effect of pursuing excellence. Find something that you're good at, that's legal, and you can monetize it, and you try to be the best at that you possibly can, because once you do that, you put yourself in a position where you wake up and work is what drives you. It's not even work at that point. You want to be the best. Right. You know, you want to have a good reputation. You want to win. So you realize that there's not enough days in a week and not enough hours in the day for you to truly chase your passion. And you go to sleep with the most exciting thing being that you want to wake up and get right back to it. And then before you know it, you look at your account and you're like, oh, wow, all that for me? I would have done this for free.
Exactly.
Joking. I wouldn't have done it for free. But yeah, so that's how that goes.
All right, let's jump into this evening's topic: affirmative
Yes,
action.
sir. Yes, sir. So,
What,
Dr.
so what are your? I know you want to. I know you have a presentation, but before we get into the presentation, like, what are your honest thoughts on affirmative action? And the argument is, well, go ahead. Give me your honest thoughts on it first, and then I'll follow up with a question.
Okay. Well, the thing is that you have to ask what it was designed for and was it living up to its purpose to begin with? Because a tool is only as useful as its use, right? So if there's a tool, if a burglar's in your house and he has a weapon and you have a weapon, but your weapon jammed, well, then what good is that weapon to begin with? So if you lose that weapon, you're not really losing much because that weapon wasn't functioning in its intended purpose to begin with. So that's how I look at affirmative action, is that it's a weapon, but it's been underutilized, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Maybe this was how it was designed to be, but it didn't live up to what it was supposed to correct. Of course, Africans that are indigenous to this place, that are the Black Americans, the people who consider Black America. Affirmative action was supposed to do a lot more for Black America to redress the systematic things that were done to Black America specifically. So you had segregation, for example, which isn't necessarily a bad thing per se to be with your own group. Now it becomes a bad thing when everybody's paying taxes and your group is always given the lesser of whatever it is. So if it's separate but consistently unequal and you're powerless to change the inequality, that's when segregation truly becomes bad. However, if you build your communities and you make them insular, that can be a benefit. But there's things like, the segregation and maldistribution of resources to certain areas on a historical trend that was occurring in Black America. And you have policies that are put forth to try and rectify and fix that. And you have to ask yourself, did affirmative action really fix many of the glaring systematic inequalities that have been meted upon Black America? And I don't really think too many people would say that affirmative action was the magic bullet that cured all of the problems of Black America.
Right. Cool. Let's jump into it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So remind me, what's the process? Is it present?
Yeah, click present, and then it'll show up on my end, and I'll put it up.
Cool.
Guys, do me a favor. Please hit the like button again. Please hit the like button, and also go ahead and hit that super chat as well. Don't be ashamed. Go ahead and hit the super chat button as well.
Let me get it going. Let me get right back to it.
All right, here we go. I got it right here.
All right, 1 second. Let me let it load up on my end.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. All right. So let's get into it. So now we spoke about it just a little bit ago, what affirmative action was actually meant to address. Affirmative action was more so meant to address the systematic inequalities that occur, that have been occurring in America to African Americans specifically, and other Black groups secondarily, if you will. But the main focus and the historic focus and the direct focus is on Black America in order to rectify some of the systematic inequalities that have happened over time. And so affirmative action really manifested itself in things like college admissions, where there was consistent, deliberate attempts to foster what they would call diversity, but really bringing for so long, Black America was pushed away from the mainstream. Chattel slavery, segregation, Jim Crow, the like. And so essentially there were efforts made to bring Black America back into the mainstream in certain areas where Black America had been marginalized. Now, one issue that we have to discuss is the fact that how successful were these programs? And when you want to talk about success, you look at the purpose and then you look at the results and you look at the beneficiaries. Now, somewhere along the line, the word minority was introduced. And this is something that Dr. Claude Anderson has talked about extensively. If you're unfamiliar with his work, it'd be difficult for anybody in this space to say that they don't know that great thinker. But if you're familiar with his work, you understand that he outlines some of the difficulties when it came to adopting the term minority. Because if you look at this on the screen now, almost everybody in this is in some way a minority, in some way. However, the problem is that minorities as a group weren't generally systematically treated in the same way that those that fall under the umbrella of being Black American were treated. So now if you treat everybody in this picture the same, it's medicine for different ailments. So you might never end up curing the thing that you intentionally set out to cure. So now the question becomes, was the intent ever to cure those issues that have been lingering for so long? This is another issue with the minority, quote unquote, coalition. Is
that Mr. Lee Choco at the beauty supply store?
I'm not sure who that is, but
Mr. Lee Choco. Gotta hear it. Go ahead.
So one of the issues is that now people assume that minorities are this one thing, and that's just completely untrue. Minorities all have different agendas, so many different cultures, and at times there are even friction points between minorities. So to treat all minorities as if they're one big group really does a disservice to African Americans in certain situations, and affirmative action, unfortunately, is one of those situations. Now, when we talk about what would be the beginnings of affirmative action, historically, we have to look at the LBJ administration.
Hold on one second, Ebube. Delina, was that you in the chokehold, Delina? Delina, did Mr. Lee have you in the chokehold at his beauty supply store, Delina? Was you trying to sneak out the beauty supply store with some 25C Yaki? Delina, was that you, Delina? Delina, were you trying to snatch some 25C Yaki and you got caught at the door by Mr. Lee? Was that you, Delina? All right, go ahead.
Let's hope not, and if it was, I didn't mean to put you out there like that. But so now we look at LBJ, and this is a direct quote. He says, "You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bring him up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you're free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair. Thus, it's not enough to just open the gates of opportunity. All our citizens must have the ability to also walk through those gates." And of course, this was at a time when there was a lot of pressure. In Black America was very organized. Black America was still very structured. And this was a time when Black America still held a lot of power and sway in regards to getting things specifically for Black America. Because if you look at things now, most politicians, when they speak about Black issues, they're vague, and sometimes it deviates to other groups who might not be directly affiliated or in any way affiliated to the original people. But yeah. Now, there was really the slow descent of affirmative action in college admissions, for example, and that's where we're going to focus. The real descent happened with the Regents case. This was a landmark decision by the Supreme Court, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court, that it involved a dispute as to whether preferential treatment for minorities could reduce educational opportunities for whites without violating the Constitution. And so basically what happened here is that the court said it's okay to allow race to be one of several factors in a college admission policy, meaning that race can be considered. So the court said that that's okay. However, the court said that specific racial quotas. So here in the California school in question, the University of California, Davis School of Medicine, out of 100 seats, they would set aside 16 seats, assuming that that mirrored the actual population of African Americans. And so the person who brought this case, Baki, he essentially said by having 16 fixed seats specifically dedicated to African Americans in this medical school denies me, because if I have a higher score, but I'm forced to compete for the 84 seats between all the other races, and someone who's only having to compete with a smaller group can actually have a lower score and I can have a higher score. Therefore, I'm being denied admission to UC Davis Medical School due to this policy. So what happened is that the courts, they listened to it and they said, you know what? You're right. Race can be one of the factors, but we can't have quotas. We're going to go ahead and get rid of all of those quotas. So you can't have a quota where you put aside a certain number of seats and say these seats particularly are going to be used for Black Americans. Now, one of the bigger issues is that this introduced strict scrutiny. Now, I don't want to get too much legalese here, but strict scrutiny. Now, in order to pass the strict scrutiny test, a law must be narrowly tailored to serve a compelling government interest. So the test applies whenever certain things are brought up, like race. So now if the policy deals with race, it gets strict scrutiny, which means that, and strict scrutiny almost always, the policies typically almost always fail under strict scrutiny. It's a very difficult standard. In order to classify people by race, whether to help or to harm them, it gets strict scrutiny. Now, it seems odd that you would put two things together in that manner rather than just applying it to the negative. But then again, if you allow it to be used in the inverse, maybe someone from a dominant group can make laws to favor them and say, well, if you're allowed to make laws to favor a certain group, I'm going to make laws to favor my group. So the way the court structures it is, whether the laws are made to favor your group or made against your group, they get the same analysis. So now most affirmative action plans were analyzed under strict scrutiny when it comes to equal protection. Now, there are different levels of scrutiny. There's rational basis, which typically that goes through. It's anytime you classify people based on certain characteristics, they get an analysis by the court, and that analysis has different levels. Intermediate scrutiny just means there has to be an important government issue. Strict scrutiny means that there has to be a compelling. And so certain things like gender, for example, certain laws are gender specific. So if you want to take student loans in the United States as a male or as a man, you have to sign up for the draft. And on its face, that law is discriminatory if you think about it. Because
whoa. Back up for a second. I never knew that. So in order to get a student loan, you have to sign up for the. But are you automatically enrolled into the military draft, or?
Well, what happens is that if you're filling out your forms, what happens is that you click the button if you took any student loans in this country as a man, you probably didn't even notice what you were doing when you were signing up for selective service. You probably just read it, clicked I agree, and then click next on the next screen. You know,
Right.
most people don't know what they're signing up for when they sign a lot of these contracts that you just scroll to the bottom and click agree. Well, you know, everybody, even I as an attorney, I'm guilty of that. Sometimes a software will have, 10 pages worth to scroll down, and you just scroll through all of it, check agree at the bottom, and click next. Now, do you really know what you just agreed to? But for example, that is discriminatory based on gender, but I believe that gets intermediate scrutiny, and protecting the nation is an important function. So there's different levels of scrutiny. Anytime you make a law that says, well, or a policy that says, well, we're going to reserve 16 seats for Black students, that's going to be viewed very strictly because it deals with race. So that was essentially I would say the death blow to affirmative action.
Let me 1 second. Let me give a shout out to Ruby. Sorry about that, Ebube. Ruby, thank you for the Cash App, for the $10 holla, and Sima Publicity. Thank you for the $10 holla. Go ahead, Ebube.
Another thing that came out of this case was that they stated that affirmative action policies were okay as long as they were used to create diversity, but you can't use it to address historical wrongs. So it kind of didn't make sense, because you would think that the whole purpose is to address some of the glaring, obvious historical wrongs that were done to Black America. So the court is saying, well, yeah, it's not for that. It's just for diversity. But then the word is, okay, like, what is diversity? It's one of those words that you can't really quantify, versus saying that this group of people had historical wrongs done to them at a systematic governmental level. So we're going to fix that at a systematic governmental level. So strict scrutiny, and then the court promulgating that these programs aren't meant to address historical wrongs, basically killed this case back in the 70s. When people talk about affirmative action hasn't really existed in the sense that it was meant to exist since about 1978. So people looking at it now saying affirmative action is dead. Well, yes, but it was a boxer who couldn't fight for a long time. So the court did state that diversity is a compelling interest. So as long as you're pursuing quote unquote diversity, which once again, how do you really define that? But as long as you're pursuing diversity, that's a compelling interest. And remember, with strict scrutiny, it needs to be narrowly tailored to a compelling interest. But they said that addressing historical wrongs is not a compelling interest, which is interesting. Now, another case came along, the Bollinger case. Now, with this case did a few things. Now, at this point, what was going on was that affirmative action was basically already starting to fall apart. Now, this case, the court held that student admission processes that favors underrepresented minority groups didn't violate the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, so long as it took into account other factors and evaluated the applicant on an individual basis. So basically, it restated the Regents' holding where race was allowed to be a consideration in the admissions policy, but you couldn't have racial quotas. So now it kind of reaffirmed that, okay, race can be one of the things that's considered, but it's a holistic approach. You can't just say, oh, we need this many Black people, or we need this many seats available for Black people. No. Now they can look at the fact that you may be a person from Black America and say, well, for diversity's sake, and for the fact that we want a diverse campus, we decided to maybe allocate some points to this person because of their background. Now that was kind of the state that we found affirmative action in up until very recently. But if you think about it, the original holding from the case prior to this had already set up affirmative action to not really be the tool that some might have hoped it to be. And now some people, they go back and they talk about, Trump and the Republicans and the liberals and this, but we have to remember that California had Proposition 209, and California is one of the most liberal states in the union. However, in California, you had this proposition which essentially banned affirmative action in the state. So they did it at a state level through a proposition. Now, we see here that unfortunately, taking away affirmative action might not have been the right time, because we look at the demographics of Black students in California, and it's under freshman admissions in 2019, and it's just under 5%. And we can actually see after Proposition 209 that admission rates dropped precipitously for Black groups especially. This is just a map showing that certain states, North, South, East, West, Midwest, certain states have already went ahead to make rules that race can't be considered in admissions. So certain people have already had affirmative action taken away from them. And a lot of people are looking at this recent ruling as if it's this great departure from what was already on ground. Affirmative action was basically gutted in 1978. So anything after that were just vestiges, were just vapors of the steam that it could have been. But this ruling isn't really moving the needle too far. It's just making people officially aware that this thing is basically in the coffin.
Guys, do me a favor, hit the like button again. Please hit the like button, and also, don't be shy. Go ahead and hit that super chat button. Go ahead and hit that Cash App. We greatly appreciate it. All right, go ahead.
All right. So along comes the case that I was just referring to, Students for Fair Admissions. Now, this case, it basically put the nail in the coffin, and basically, the court said that before, the courts were saying, all right, no quotas, but race can be a consideration. And they kind of reaffirmed that and said, you know what, this is where we're moving to. This is how we're moving. But yeah, you can still consider it. Now, some states went ahead to say, you know what we're doing is we're going to go ahead and just get rid of it at a state level. You can't consider race. And they stated that the best way to heal race relations is to not talk about race, not even bring it up, which is an interesting perspective. So Students for Fair Admission was a nonprofit group of more than 20,000 students, parents, and others who believe that racial classifications and preferences in college admissions are just unfair and unnecessary and also unconstitutional. So their mission was to participate in litigation that will restore what they saw as the original vision of civil rights, according to what their stated purpose is. Now, when the court ruled, the interesting thing is that equal protection was consistently brought up. And when you think about it, this was actually created to ensure that it was a tool created to ensure that some of the damage that was done to the Black American community would be rectified. So it's interesting that this was the justification for removing, even if the policy was only symbolic at this point. It's interesting that that is the tool that they used. Now, when it comes to the Supreme Court, you had a vast majority ruling against it. I believe there was.
Ebube, sorry to interject.
Go ahead.
Can you address this comment on the screen right now? Because you're a parent, you're a product of immigrants. Like, can you just like what are your thoughts when people make comments like this? What are your thoughts on it?
That colleges and universities can no longer consider race in their admission process after the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against affirmative action.
No. The comment that's on the screen now. Do you see it?
This is what happens when you allow immigrants to come in and you fail to educate them appropriately about lingering issues.
What are your thoughts on when people make comments like that?
Well, like, who are immigrants? Like, if you move here from Canada, I mean, Drake is an immigrant, but if you move here from Guatemala, you're also an immigrant. If you move here from Pakistan, you're also an immigrant. You move here from Nigeria, you're also an immigrant. And the thing is, it's like, these are different people, very different people with very different thought processes and very different understandings of the world. So what happens when you make blanket statements is that you group things that are similar but very dissimilar. It's interesting, but then again, it shows that person probably, and you have to remember that most people are, and I don't want to be insulting, but most people are average thinkers. They don't think too deeply about too many topics. It's more so an anomaly that you'll have somebody that can really think deeply about something and discuss deeply at length about something, and everything they're saying is essentially making sense, or they're at least demonstrating a unified ideology where they've thought everything that they're saying through, at a minimum. So when I see comments like that, I think, well, okay, you know what? If I actually had a discussion with this person, I probably would come to the conclusion that maybe they were just speaking to say things as opposed to speaking to have an interaction to learn something. And that's okay. That's how some people are. You just have to accept it and move past it. So I look at it like that. I look at it at the end of the day. And there's also this wave that's occurring where it's like, I remember in the 90s, there was like this thing where it's like Africans were bad or something. It was this Africans were being put in this category of being bad, or someone said, African people come to America and take all the jobs, and it was crazy because there's a lot of jobs in this country. Nobody's taking anything from anybody. So there was this movement where it was a very divisive rhetoric was being passed around, and unfortunately, I think some of that is being resurrected again. But it's really not constructive, because at the end of the day, your enemy isn't other people who share your same skin tone, who are also in the same system as you. That's not your default enemy. Right? It's like sometimes people get put in jail. If 100 people are put in jail unjustly, and then they start fighting each other over trivial matters, the person that they're not fighting is the person who put them in the jail unjustly. And that's good for the jailer, because you'll never really have the strength or even the awareness or wherewithal to fight the person who's illegally keeping you detained. So those type of thoughts run through my mind, but maybe in like a split second, and then I kind of just move on.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, but so this is the Supreme Court and how they ruled, and it is what it is. They came to a conclusion, but once again, you have to remember that affirmative action is, at this point, was largely symbolic. It had been gutted in the 70s with the first challenge. The first case that really challenged it at that level, kind of gutted that case. And we have to look at the SAT scores, and we have to ask ourselves, what are the factors that are, even though scores for certain groups have risen, but it's almost as if these scores stay consistent, and there's really no real changes to them. So you have to ask yourself, what is being done that a certain group is consistently scoring lower and a certain group is consistently scoring higher, because I'm of the belief that in every group, right? Okay, let's say out of 100 people in any group, culture, race, nation, you're going to have 70 people who are average people, average thinkers, average intellect, just average. Most people are average. 70% of the world's population is average. Now, outside of the 70% that are just average, not below average, just normal everyday person, you have 15% that are above average. Then you have 15% that are below average. Now, every group, and this isn't by skin color, because every group and nation has their group of people who excel, who are just a little smarter than average. And these are the people that should actually be at the helm of planning and strategizing for that particular culture. So now when you have tests like this, and it seems like the 15% isn't really being demonstrated, you have to ask about, what is this test really testing? Also, too, there are strong correlations between the test and family income. But that's not as strong. They're there, but that's not as strong. Now, it's important to note that, like I said earlier, black skin in and of itself doesn't make one intellectually inferior. And we have to remember that it's not about black people being given positions that they wouldn't have deserved because they just don't have the intellect. What we have is what we were supposed to have with affirmative action is we were supposed to have something to correct the inadequacies and the wrongs done to a specific group that prevented them, and especially the 15%, if you will, from truly actualizing and becoming what they're supposed to become and compete with the 15% from the other cultures. However, black skin is in no way inferior, as we see that we have black people from all over the world who might not have been necessarily subjected to those same factors excelling. We also have indigenous black Americans who showed in the past and in the present great signs of genius. However, many of these people were put in a system where they might have never have actualized that based on the circumstances that they were subjected to. So you look at somebody like a Jay-Z, who, if you understand his writing process or the process by which he creates his art form, it's almost like a sign of genius. This person will write 10 songs in their head, and it's not just gibberish without a pen. But this person at 16, 17, 15 was in the narcotics trade. However, had that same person been in any other culture or society, they might have just been a rocket scientist or been put in a position where that genius could truly flourish. So once again, it's not as if black skin is inherently inferior. Black skin has the 15% that excel, the 15% that are slightly below average, and then the vast majority of people who are just average, normal, everyday people. So, we still have black skin breaking records. And so at the end of the day, some of these I would like to see highlighted more to break that narrative that blacks are just this consistent underclass who needs assistance, unfair assistance, if you will. No. Once again, affirmative action was meant to correct injustices specifically done to one group that has, in a lot of ways, set Black America back. So, more needs to be spoken of in regards to that narrative, because it's just a false narrative, and blacks can compete on every and any level in all cultures. Just where black skin is being marginalized, there should have been more steps to address that. Now, another thing that's being addressed are the quote unquote legacy admissions. Now, for example, in some places, you look at the acceptance rates for legacy versus normal, meaning that if you're just a regular normal guy off the street, no connections to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and you apply at Harvard, you have just around a 6% chance of getting in. So maybe 6 out of every 100 people. Yale, 7 out of every 100 people. Princeton, basically an 8 out of every 100 people. If you're just a normal applicant, meaning once again, you have no connections to the school. However, if you're a legacy, meaning that your great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, you have strong ties and connections to a certain school and you're affiliated with that school. At Harvard, 1 in 3 get in. At Yale, 1 out of 4 get in. At Princeton, 1 out of 3 get in, which is substantially higher. At Harvard, for example, you're 5 times more likely to get in if your father, mother, grandfather, and in certain communities, there's no way that their great-great-great-grandfather could have attended any of these universities. So we see here some of the Ivy League schools, the acceptance rates for legacy versus non-legacy. We see that, you have a very high likelihood, if you're a legacy student, of getting in Harvard, Brown, Dartmouth, UPenn, Princeton. Also, too, another issue that's being raised are the donors, the donor class. Now, the donor class has led to some murky situations with the Varsity Blues scandal. So some very prominent figures were actually taken down in that issue. So we had Felicity Huffman, for example. She was recently released, but she pled guilty to paying college admissions consultants money to have proctors change her daughter Sophia's answers after she took the SAT. She served jail time. She was sentenced to 250 hours of community service. And, it was one of those situations where people are now starting to look at some of this alternative admissions that have been happening. And they're starting to question whether or not, these should be addressed as well. So you have a person here pictured on this screen confessed to paying around $500,000 to ensure that their children were accepted into a university. And allegedly, the daughters were falsely labeled as athletic recruits in order to get in. And all of this was cracked down in an operation called Varsity Blues. In 2019, a scandal arose over a criminal conspiracy to influence undergraduate admission decisions at many top American universities. The investigation into the conspiracy was codenamed Operation Varsity Blues. In the investigation and related charges, U.S. federal prosecutors netted about 53 people and charged them as being part of the conspiracy. Many of them have already pleaded guilty or agreed to plead guilty. 33 parents of college applicants were accused of paying more than $25 million just between the years of 2011 and 2018 to William Rick Singer. And this is just over the course of 7 years. So when you look at things like legacy admissions, and then you look at things like donors, and then you look at situations like this, some people are saying that there might be more to college admissions than just simply having really good scores. Now, people have also brought up HBCUs, and several questions are arising because now the question is, okay, where do HBCUs fit in, right? Because if people who might have, if race was allowed to be a consideration, might have normally gone to a school that maybe they might not have got into because, remember, diversity, of course, was allowed to be a compelling interest for policies to be able to pursue them. But currently, HBCU admissions are actually down, which is surprising. But then again, the question is now, what's going to happen with the HBCUs? Are they going to become points where people say, you know what, let me make sure that I have a school that I can get into. Let me go there. Now, that might be good in a sense where it brings students who would have otherwise contributed and participated at other institutions to come back to some of the historically Black colleges and universities. But the real issue that we have to ask about is power. Now, power is twofold. It's knowing what you want and having the ability to do it. It's very simple. That's all power is, knowledge and ability. If you're hungry and you know you're hungry and you know you have a sandwich in the fridge and you're in your living room and you can walk to the kitchen, open the fridge and get the sandwich, you have the power to satisfy your hunger. Now, power also is exclusionary. Power is being able to exclude others. But in order to exclude others, you have to first build something that's attractive to others and attractive to you and yourself and your community. So this might be a symbol or a sign to say, you know what? Anytime you go to someone else, to another person's house, you're always a guest in their house. There's only so much you can do under the status of guest because the host always has the power to simply ask you to leave. And so if the host always has the power to ask you to leave, then maybe you need to work on building something where you can ask them to leave, but first you got to build something that they even want to be there. So this raises a bigger issue of power. For how long are you going to not have this segment cemented? How long are we going to allow there not to be the Black version of Harvard, right? Of Yale, of Stanford? You know, every community chooses to try and make something theirs, have something of their own. And that's necessary for the survival of any culture. All right, Donis, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, so what we'll do, hold on, there's an echo. We'll put the link in the chat room. If you guys want to call in and add to the conversation, go ahead and click on the link. Again, links in the chat room. If you want to call in and add to the conversation, go ahead and click on the link if you'd like to add to the convo. And what we'll do, we'll take a quick commercial break and we'll be right back.
One of the greatest empires in world history was the Mali Empire. The Mali Empire was one of the most prosperous and powerful empires in the antiquity of Africa. Its growth and expansion from the 13th century onwards was legendary and pivotal in the history and culture of Western Africa. The Mali Empire Volume 1 from author J.P. Martin, available on Amazon, is a book which provides the full historical record of the Mali Empire. From their control over the trans-Saharan trade routes and development of great cities such as Timbuktu, to their influential royal class who produced notable African kings such as Mansa Musa, Sundiata Keita, and Mansa Abubakar Keita II, the Mali Empire made a significant impression. This book is perfect for anyone interested in learning more about the history of Western Africa. Order your copy right now on Amazon. The Mali Empire, Volume 1, from author J.P. Martin. Go to Amazon.com and get your copy today.
At the Okoli Law Group, we specialize in producing justice. If you or a loved one in the Atlanta metro area is facing serious criminal charges, then you need serious legal representation.
The Okoli Law Group is here for you. The Okoli Law Group is here for us.
The Okoli Law Group, serious legal representation.
All right, links in the chat room. If you guys want to call in and add to the convo, click on the link. If you guys want to call in and add to the convo, click on the link. Also, hit the like button as well. Please hit the like button. Also, make sure you share and subscribe if you are new. And don't be shy. Hit the super chat and the Cash App button as well. Oh, let me finish reading. In fact, well, no, she had an attitude, man. She had a real ugly attitude. Yeah, so I don't want to give her any attention. The lady that brought up the whole immigrant situation, immigrants not, I guess, being aware of, the history of the United States of America in regards to race relations.
Well, like I said, it seems like recently people are trying to demonize immigrants, and it's like, that's not really constructive. Now, if there are people who are doing certain things that happen to be immigrants, yeah, sure. But to throw everybody who's not from this country into a box and make them bad is just as ignorant as the people who might be behaving in the manner that's reprehensible.
Philip, go ahead.
Philip, good evening.
Yeah, I was hearing a little background. Was that me?
No, you're good. Go ahead, Philip.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I got a little. Oh, I know what it is. Hold on for a second. Let me. That's what it was. I had the other page still open. Brother Dinas, Brother Okoli, tremendous presentation as always. I'm curious, Brother Okoli, what is your take on this in terms of the results? And I can give you what I thought, but I was curious. Did you say that already? I don't know if I missed it.
When you say the results, you mean the Supreme Court ruling?
Well, in terms of the overall impact on Black America / the Black diaspora for college admission.
Okay. Well, once again, I briefly touched on it, but I'll go back.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I might have missed it.
All right. Whenever you look at something, you want to gauge its effectiveness. You first have to say, what's the purpose of this thing, right? So you might buy, something, and then you read the instructions, and then if it falls very far short of what it was supposed to do, then you know that thing didn't work as intended. So it didn't serve its purpose. So we ask, what was the purpose of affirmative action? And it goes back to LBJ, essentially saying that Black America, you can't tell somebody, I'm going to disadvantage you for hundreds of years, and then one day take the chains off and say, all right, compete, because you did something unfair for hundreds of years. Then now you have to systematically do something that would be perceived to be fair for just as long, if not longer, in order to fix what was broken. Now, we see that very early on in the 70s, by saying, well, it can be a factor, but then applying strict, and I believe you're an attorney, correct? You understand with strict scrutiny, that's a very difficult standard. So once that latched on, and then the court determining that, and of course with strict scrutiny, you need that narrowly tailored for a compelling interest. And the court stating that fixing problems from the past isn't a compelling interest. It's like, well, wait a minute, isn't that the whole purpose of why this was put forth to begin with? So when you see that it was basically destroyed at the fundamental level, and then given the highest analysis, the highest, strict scrutiny, you've basically set it up to not ever really work as intended, because as intended, it was supposed to fix historical problems. but the court explicitly said, we're not going to use this to fix historical problems. We're going to use it to foster something called diversity. So now the question is, well, what exactly is diversity? It's one of those words that can mean everything and nothing, right? Because I could say this is a diverse group of people. Some people are in this group have blue on, some have black on, some have gray, right? Now, but really, we're probably all in the same demographic. But if I want to, I can say we're a diverse group, and we might not be in actuality. So what exactly is diversity? And if that's now the goal, as opposed to rectifying past wrongs, then we see that it was hobbled out of the gate. So it being withered away by the Supreme Court, what was it really doing that was so fundamental to Black America? Like, if you really think about it, the problems that are deep inside of Black America, I don't really think that affirmative action was really addressing any of those systematic problems that are still lingering from yesteryear.
Yeah, so very eloquently put, Brother Okoli, and I agree with that 100%. That the issue became the poison pill that they put in it in the Bakke case, and exactly the concept of excluding white males, which was the actual poison, but including white females, then brought in the factors that watered it down to a point where it wasn't doing what it was supposed to do, which was to have some sort of reparative access to higher education for Black Americans. In addition to that, I would throw that it was really the Black middle and Black upper middle classes that were the true beneficiaries of the programs that they did have. Because
why do you say that?
Well, because when you look at the economic profile for the schools that they were talking about, and I'm not talking about your local community college, I'm not talking about your local commuter college, I'm talking about a UCLA, a UC Berkeley, a University of Michigan, the public Ivies, the Stanfords, that when you actually look at who was going, it was not, unless you're including Black athletes, which is a separate part of this, but it was not primarily the Black working and underclasses that were getting access. Yes, there were some, but the majority of the Blacks who were getting access were Black people from the Black middle and the Black upper middle and Black immigrants. That's who that was. And so, and it's a small percentage at that. You went to law school. I know Dynas went to college. We can all, when we have the discussion, we can all think back. Where I went to college, I knew all the Black kids in the school on a first name basis. That's how few there were. And actually for law school too, there were very few Blacks there. And usually, when I ask people per class, and I don't know, Brother Okoli, if you, this is my rough summary, but usually per class, it was somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 7 Black males and somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 14 Black females.
That was exactly what my also was.
That's good. When I was at UGA, like there were some classes where it just made 3 Black.
Oh no, he means in the entire school.
Yeah, in the
in the actual class. Like
no, I meant in the law school.
Oh wow.
In the entire school, like no, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what it was. The entire school, there were 7 Black males, and I think there were actually substantially more Black females. There were, I think, 15.
Yeah, right. I said 9 to about 14. In yours, it was 15. But when I asked my fellow Black attorneys, this is roughly the number. So what are we really talking about? We weren't a big factor even with, and this is quote unquote the best of the best, right? Because you had to have had a academic career to even qualify to go to law school, right? So you had to have solid undergrad. So because I asked you a query, my feeling now is that what this is going to do, at least for Blacks, and then we can talk about the other groups because I have an opinion about that, that it's going to reduce the amount of Black professionals that we have. That will be the outcome. You will have the same theater network from the HBCUs, but as far as Black Americans going through the land grant colleges and the public Ivies, you're going to see that go down. Just as you've actually seen it, California removed affirmative action some time ago, and like UCLA, I think they're floating around 6%. But when it first went in place, they were floating around 2 to 3% Black population, and I always back out of that. If you take out the athletes, it's really more like if they were at 3%, it's more like 1%. And now that they're at 6%, if you took the athletes out of that, that would probably be somewhere around 3%. So, unless you're a student athlete, but I'm just saying, that. So what are we doing?
Yeah, we are student athletes.
Yeah, Dynas, we are. But you know this as well as I did. I play sports as well. And some of our students were not quite the same students as other students. Would you agree?
Yeah, but we still count as students, even though we're athletes. We still count as students.
Yes,
on
but
paper.
that's a more
that's
a more nuanced conversation.
Right. We still counted as students on paper.
Well,
now we had the football major.
Are we gonna do
we
this?
still counted as students.
Okay, Dinah. So you are we going to talk about when we go on the road and how those study sessions were going?
Well, listen, but
are we going to talk about it?
We were still students. So we were still students.
Sure.
I mean, define the term student.
We had to be enrolled in classes in order to compete. So we were students.
We're digressing, gentlemen. I'm not going to take the bait, Dylas. Yes, they were student athletes. Did you play sports, Brother Okoli? I know you're a tall guy.
Yeah, I played sports. My two younger brothers, one played at Kansas State, the other played at Penn State. My younger cousin, my younger brother, got a lot of athletes in my family. Sure. I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't want to reveal any secrets here, but there's a difference.
We'll move on.
There's a difference between the people that probably could have got there without sports and the people that got there solely because of sports.
Correct.
But don't hate. Listen, don't hate. Don't hate.
Nobody's hating here. We're going to keep it moving. So, Brother Okoli and Brother Dynas, my feeling about this was that this decision really was about overrepresentation of Asians in these schools. And what I mean by that is per percentage of the population that in, say, the case of something I know about, UCLA, that at UCLA, Asians are something like 30%, 35% of the undergrad population, whereas as a national demographic,
whoa, how much?
35%.
At UCLA, you said?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure
I'm pretty sure the same at Berkeley and
exactly
Stanford. Wow.
Exactly, and so this is where the Mzungus had a problem. It wasn't necessarily the blacks.
No. But it was the Asian students who actually who I guess led the way as far as fighting affirmative action.
Yes, so they got the people they wanted to remove to blow up their own bridge with anti-black racism.
Explain.
So this young man that they convinced to be part of the lawsuit, saying that, and I'll just be honest, he wasn't he didn't have the grades to go to Harvard, and he didn't have the test scores either. He probably is a guy that would have wound up at a public Ivy at Berkeley or something like that. But he wasn't a Harvard person. You're talking about valedictorians and salutatorians at that place. You're not talking about his grades. So he was wrong off the jump. But let's take him out of it and just look at the situation. That basically what you had was you have a lot of Asian students who across the board score higher than whites. And if you just looked at GPA and test scores. And so in their mind, they feel like, well, look, if we've got the best grades and the best test scores, not taking into account what we talked about, the principles, the factors that are supposed to be part of the admissions, they feel like they should be,
What's that noise? It's like a background noise.
Is that me?
I don't know what that is.
No, it's not me.
Oh, go ahead. I think it's
okay. Yeah. So if you ask them, they think they should be, 40, 50% of the school if they've got the scores. Whereas what was happening, and Ebube, you actually spoke about this in talking about the Varsity Blues case. The reason why all of those, what I would call poor rich people, they aren't the real rich. They're the people who can't actually buy their ways into schools, okay? The reason why they were doing that is because their kids could not get into the UC system, so they need to buy their way into University of Southern California. And that was one of the big places where they were at, was because they didn't have the scores to get into any of the land grant colleges. So they bought their way in. And that is because a lot of those slots were taken by Asians, not by whites. And so that's the real target here. And as you started to see, the diversity hires are now disappearing, and the slots are disappearing, and the Asians are now seeing that they're going under attack almost immediately after the case was decided.
So explaining to me, for example, if they're going to not use race as a factor with the new ruling, and they're going to solely use test scores.
Yep.
If Asians
they're not going to just use test scores. I'm sorry I interrupted.
What's going to be the criteria if they're not considering? Well, if they're not considering, huh?
You actually know, Ebube. You talked about the principles. They're not going to just use test scores and grades. They're going to use all these principles the Supreme Court talked about that are race neutral, which will include more whites and exclude more Asians and everybody else.
Okay, I think I'm understanding your theory. So basically, you're saying that the ruling that was promulgated, on the surface, it may seem like it's going after one group, but you're saying that the effect is really going to affect another group. But how is that going to happen?
Well, because when you look at the principles and that they are taking into account, and then something that we all know, which is that many of these white families that are helping their students go to college are spending somewhere in the ballpark of $15,000 to $30,000 in test prep, college prep, tutors, college writing. I know plenty of people that have spent that on their kids. Black people weren't competing for that. They weren't in that game. Only the black middle and upper middle have a shot at that. And how many people is that really? The black middle or upper middle is small. So yeah, the reason why the Asians can compete is because they have this thing called Asian after school. So like the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, which black people, by the way, and this is important to note, Dinus, we had this as well in the 70s and we walked away from it, where after school, they go to Korean school or Chinese school or Japanese school and they learn Mandarin or Korean or Japanese. And they also had extensive math and science tutoring. I think you guys know that, right?
Yeah, I've heard about something similar for certain other cultures as well. For example, that happens in New York among certain cultures there as well.
Yeah. So, and Black Americans had that. We used to have Black after school, and they taught Swahili, and they did math tutoring. And actually, coming out of that, the civil rights leader, Bob Moses, had a whole program called the Algebra Project that still is trying to do that, and some school districts have adopted it. But basically, Black Americans walked away from that in the 80s. And so
that would have been, it's programs like that I hate to hear fading away, because those are the types of things that other cultures are using to compete and become stronger generation after generation.
Well, it's hard to do that when you don't have intact families, you know. And at the same time that our families started to crumble, this all was in the 70s, Ebube, that in the 70s, the Black family started to fade because, you know, we've had this discussion about the industrial base being offshored, and the primary Black middle class was built off of factory workers. So when that happened, then the family started to crumble, right? And the Black females were able to have access to college education and to a certain amount of welfare benefits. And the Black males went to the streets. They didn't have access to any of that. So then the family started to crumble. Then the programs went away. And by 1980, we were uncompetitive, at least in that social dynamic after school. Whereas, and this is actually to your program, Dinus, whereas our Asian and Arab counterparts actually went back to their home countries and built supply chains and business chains. And that's why we are losing and they are winning, is because by 1990, 2000, then that the investment that they made to build circular economics held them up. Whereas for us, it absolutely kept us in the street, and we're still there now. Sorry to say, but your show can change that, Dinah.
Hey, I've been preaching it since 2011.
Yeah. And Brother Ebube, you've been dropping the dimes on what's happening with our DNA homeland, in terms of what we need to get involved with. But I do think that there are solutions to this. One of the things that I've been trying to push with my people that are HBCU involved is to try to encourage joint university programs with the African universities, to try to get a circular education system. Which they're doing, but it's small, right? But what we really need is circular education. So, when you do that year abroad, that you could do that in Lagos, or you could do that in Accra, or you could do that, in whatever African country. That would be a way to kind of build ourselves up, because we're late to the game, Brother Okoli.
So, definitely, but still showing up is better than not showing up at all.
Well, that's what it's about. It's about winning, right? So doesn't matter when you start your first steps, start them. I agree. So that was my view, Brother Okoli, was that this decision, we're used to being the primary target of these programs that are taken away. But in this particular case, we were the we were the image, but not the actual target. It was actually Asians. And you can check me on those stats. They're overrepresented at these schools by a lot. If you look at Harvard, if you look at Yale, and specifically, it's the Chinese. Because amongst Asians, there's actually a lot of competition in there. So it's like Chinese and Koreans are the primary ones, but demographically, the Filipinos are the larger group, but those Asian slots are being taken by Chinese. So there's beef there too, of like, now under Asian, that can be anywhere from Indian to Chinese to Japanese to the Southeast Asians, Vietnamese, the Thai, whatever. But when the box only says Asian, right? So it turns out that in most cases it's the Chinese, and their after school programs are the strongest, by the way, followed by the Koreans. It's almost, you can just look who have the biggest after school programs, which groups are getting in the most. There you go. You know,
And they're serious. They're competing.
Well, right, and it's cultural too that we walked away from those things. You know, if we could do it, but some kind of way we got lost in, you know, how you actually compete from this. If you don't have the money, then you have to make it up by culture. Would you agree, Brother Okoli?
100%, 100%. And that's really, it's like the open secret that if you just grow up in a household where certain things are stressed, certain things are pushed. Like, so for example, in a Nigerian household, you're going to be one of four things: a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer, and potentially they might let you be a professor, you know, but that's what's pushed to you. And they tell you that you're going to be one of those things. Now, whether or not you choose to practice there is your business. If you want to go do anything else, if you want to go be an artist, you want to do this and that, first get that degree out of the way. So at the minimum, you have a practice area. And then that's like a basic requirement almost. And it's enforced at the family level to where it's you know, it's things like that are good. You know, I pray things like that stay and reverberate among other Black groups in this country, because, you know, we're playing this thing as a team sport. And what I see though is I potentially see the HBCUs almost having a rebirth, if you will. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's going to be a challenge. I think that it could. All right, and actually, Dynas is a person to talk about this too. The two of you, because here's the thing, Brother Okoli, and that is the financial aid that they're dependent upon has changed. It actually changed under Obama about this PLUS loan. And the PLUS loan is the loan that parents take out to assist to help their student borrow enough to go to school. And after the subprime scandal, then they tighten that up where you have to have higher credit to be able to qualify for that loan. So actually, as the numbers you showed on the screen now, Brother Okoli, that the numbers have been going down, not up. And that's because many of the Black families that were able to qualify and have the money to go to school before don't qualify now, even if their student has the marks. It's because they don't have the financing. They can't bridge it. So that's one issue. The other issue is endowment, and that all of the schools that we were talking about have big endowments, whereas most of the HBCUs do not. As many graduates as they produce, their endowments are relatively low. They don't tend to give money back. So then that takes away from giving grants and scholarships to help, you know, broaden the amount of students you can service, right? And if you've talked to, I have one of my cousins is a professor at Southern in Louisiana, and she talks about it all the time, of the amount of resources and how limited it is. So you need some sort of larger commitment to resources to be able, you know, I mean, isn't that what came up with what's the guy's name? Deion Sanders, talking about what the facility quality was there. And so that's why I said it's perfect, is because you were a top flight high school athlete, and now imagine a scenario like this where the schools that come a calling are UCLA, UGA. You know, I know you would not look at Ohio State, but no, I just said that because Lumumba. But you know that, or Howard, right? Would you have considered passing up these big name brand programs to go play football for Howard or Hampton or Southern or Grambling? Because you could go anywhere. No, right?
I listen, in the ninth grade, I met Eddie Robinson, who was the former head coach of the University of Grambling University.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him I was coming to Grambling. But that's before I got offered by UCLA, Georgia, Notre Dame, Nebraska, University of Texas, Tennessee. Yeah.
So you didn't keep it real, Dynas. You didn't keep it real, man.
I just I was 14 at the time, and when I
They-
turned
they-
17,
It's not a legally binding contract. You're only
yeah. Then when I
14.
turned 17, and again, Tennessee, Georgia, USC, UCLA,
right.
I went to their facilities, and then they didn't have pictures of Gramblin's facilities anywhere.
They're not on TV. That was what I was going to say,
Yeah.
Brother Okoli. They don't even have a TV deal.
No,
I
the
think.
only time I would see Grambling on TV is the Bayou Classic when they would play.
Exactly.
Stuff. Yeah, that was it.
I think Byron Allen was talking about broadcasting them now, but the bottom line is that your whole thing is to get seen so that you can try to make it to the NFL. That's the problem, Brother Okoli, is the resources. Unless we do this unification with some of the African universities and get the funding up a little bit, there will be a renaissance, but I think it will be muted. Is my answer. I gave a long roundabout answer to say this summation that I gave.
When you say muted, what exactly do you mean by that term?
Well, if you don't have enough resources, then what should be a renaissance flourish that you described will be a higher trickle, in my view, because the athletes are still going to go to the land grant colleges because their goal is to become a professional athlete.
Well, I'm not talking about just the athletes. I'm talking about the general student body as well. So, for example, students that might have went to another school under the old regime where race could be considered might decide, you know what, let me have a safe school or consider a school that I might not have originally considered. Do you think that's a potential possibility? I'm talking about the larger body as opposed to just the small segment of actual athletes, student athletes.
Well, maybe, and I agree, Brother Okoli, that's true. I mean, and I'm not going to say I was a prototypical student, but I looked at Howard. My grandmother had gone to Howard, and one of the issues was I looked at endowment because I had gone to a high school in Chicago, which is where I am now, where the resources were limited and we had a bunch of kids. And so I was like, for college, I need to look at that endowment and make sure that this place has the resources to provide the kind of program that I need, so I can get a job. Now, not everybody was looking at it that way. But, my folks, at that time, actually, believe it or not, my dad wanted me to be a dentist. I had shown some aptitude for science. And he had looked at the numbers of demand for dentists and wanted me to be a dentist. So I was, and I double majored in science for 2 years. But the bottom line was that it's about resources. And I think that that's still the case. Now, I don't know, how much kids of today are doing that, but certainly the numbers and the data is more accessible to them with the internet to say, well, am I going to go to this school, which has this amount of teachers and computers and, library access and whatever, or am I going to go to that school? And I think for the big brand name HBCUs, I think they will see a spike. But I think for like the Bethune-Cookmans of the world, some of these other smaller HBCUs, I don't know if the numbers will go up that much just because the resources aren't there. You basically need a commitment from the federal government to invest and the state governments. But if you can't get it from the federal government to put more resources into those schools, and that's essentially what backdoor of this case was about, was to get the resources that were being lost by the majority population away from the students who are not going to contribute to the endowment in their view, and to get their kids in there and to shift them to the schools that don't have those resources. But
Interesting.
That's my 2 cents. I don't know. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's interesting because there's always going to be a blowback, and sometimes there's misdirection when certain groups decide to take certain actions and make certain people the face, even though that group of people might not actually be the target. They're just used as the face. And sometimes when the face is used, the face might actually also end up being harmed in the overall action, like a use and dump almost.
Sure. Sure. I mean, listen, I don't want to be a doom and gloom person on this. I'm hopeful that we do see a spike in the HBCUs, but I'm even more hopeful that there's more unification between African universities and HBCUs to affect that curriculum, because that's another factor. I don't know if you have, either one of you, a lot of family that's gone to the HBCUs, but there's been a tweaking of the curriculum as well. When my grandmother went in the, she came out of law school in the 50s, so she would have been in Howard in the maybe early 50s, late 40s. That was what they built race men and women. Have you ever heard that term?
Yeah.
Okay. They no longer build race men and women, not in that same way. Yeah, if you remember Francis Quest.
Dr. Francis Quest Welsing would describe her father as a race man. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And she was fired from Howard.
Interesting how that completely shifted.
But then there are others. You can go on down the list of.
And you have to remember as well that a lot of the HBCUs aren't really owned by people who are Black. They're owned by people.
Nor were they founded by people who are Black, and that was not their intent necessarily to. All right, do you want to go into this, Brother Okoli?
Yeah. The
let's do it.
Yeah. Well, we got about 10 more. We got about 10 more minutes, but we could. Philip, what are you doing tomorrow?
I'm here working, brother. I tried to tell you, I'm here in Chicago.
Well, I'm saying, you want to do a show? You want to do a show tomorrow on the HBCUs?
I want to commit to something. You saw me reaching to my computer over here while I was talking, man.
Yeah, but tomorrow, just an hour. Can we get an hour?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we talk offline and see if we can't put a show together with the three of us, and we'll talk about it. So that way I don't have so much weight, but I don't know that I can do it tomorrow. We'll put it.
Okay. Well, yeah. Just let me know, Boo.
I'm already here, overcommitted. I'm already here over. I hate to do that, Diamond, of saying stuff that I can't do.
Well, that's fine. It's all good. It's all good.
What type of law do you practice, by the way?
Corporate.
Oh man, you guys are busy. You guys are busy. You guys work every day, but I work every day. It is what it is.
I was literally trying to do some stuff while I was listening to. So listen, brother, Diana, you see me here, man. I'm trying to sell this place. Right. I can't commit to that tomorrow, but I will commit to doing an HBCU program. If Brother Okoli will join me, and we can and plan it out. I will do that. Okay. Out of fairness, I can't bring it up and take it off the table. Okay. Is that fair?
That's
right.
Right.
I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, don't be that guy.
Okay.
Don't be that guy.
All right. So, Brother Okoli, if this was your show, man, I have not had the pleasure of being on the panel with you, and I did want to get your thoughts on it.
No, I'm definitely glad you came. I just actually enjoy listening to your analysis. It's very thorough analysis. It's something you can actually sit down thinking about, and I can tell that everything you say is well reasoned, and I know that you've thought about it, and you're not just speaking just to be hearing yourself talking. So it's very refreshing.
Well, thank you, brother. Well, listen, you presented a wonderful overview of what I think the issues are, and particularly, this thing about the class and the strict scrutiny. And so now, I think we'll have to see what the results are going to be. But I think just generally that the principles that you and Dinas have emphasized on this show are things that Black people can take and try to build with. If we got to work on our families, we got to try to emphasize excellence. We got to, not focus on the problems, but to figure out how to win. So I support that, and hopefully that's what'll happen. I'd love to see the Renaissance, Brother Okoli, but I do see there's an economic issue that we have there, and I'm not saying that it won't happen, but I think that we have to prepare better. And that's actually another issue of this too, which I didn't raise, which is a lot of our people, we go to these top schools, but because we don't have a Black small business class family-owned business and corporate class for corporate clients, that we're not the careers of our top people are stunted because they can't build a book of business, Brother Okoli.
At all.
Right? And that's a problem.
It's a huge problem because you can't do business within your community. And so to an extent, you're always at the mercy of other cultures, which really is no way, because a culture will only empower another culture so much, but they'll never put you in a position to ever really challenge or rival them.
And that's the real issue. So, from my standpoint, the focus should be on incubating small business within the college environment and also on the continent, specifically in Nigeria, to get some circular economics going so that we can actually have places for our best and brightest to go once they graduate.
And this may be an odd statement to make from somebody who holds a doctorate degree, but college isn't for everybody, right? In fact, it'd be best if certain people just didn't go to college and rather picked up a trade and really honed in on that trade, worked that trade, and then eventually turned that into a business, a necessary business. So you need a plumber. You got people in the community that are master plumbers. You need an electrician. You have those things in the community rather than people just going and getting a useless degree in something that's not a STEM degree, and it really didn't put them in a position to really have a trade or a skill to do anything outside of potentially being an employee.
I support that 200%. I've said to Dynas, particularly on the continent, young people that have HVAC skills, not so much for the homes, but for the malls and various what you would call commercial property spaces, which is an area, as I'm understanding it, that we want to grow as a group, both domestically and with our brothers in the continent. That just HVAC skills and some of these other basic trade skills really could come in handy. And I agree with you, Brother Okoli, 100%, 200%.
Yeah, but what we'll go ahead and close out. Ebube, anything else you'd like to share in closing?
If you haven't hit the like button, go ahead and hit the like button. If you haven't paid your way with hitting the share button, go ahead and hit that as well. Also, to make sure you subscribe to Up Close and Center. I will be dropping new documentaries as soon as I can get some of these cases off my docket. But once again, thank you everybody for being here. We will figure out a way to have a part 2 where we hone in on some issues that were raised today. And I thank you for everybody's time, your commitment to the continent and justice.
Hey, I appreciate it, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Like, share, subscribe. Until next time, family, Dynasty Mirror Search for Huru. Peace.